They never tell you this, but the greatest sign of confidence isn't a big smile, a fiery speech, or even a flaunting of titles. The true sign is silent, lethal, and often uncomfortable for those observing. It's that moment when someone doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to ask for approval, doesn't need to fill the void with words, and yet they dominate the entire room. Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and all eyes turn, even without effort? It's not luck, it's strategy. Machiavelli once said, "Politics should be guided by reality, not ideals." And the reality is simple. Those who are loudest almost always hide weakness. Those who control silence wield power. It's as if they were saying without opening their mouths, "I know who I am, and I don't need you to confirm it." It's counterintuitive, because we grow up believing that confidence means speaking loudly, asserting yourself, and demonstrating courage in every gesture. But truly confident people play a different game. They don't seek to be loved at any cost, because they know it's better to be feared than loved, as long as they avoid being hated. Lethal confidence isn't theatrical, it's almost invisible, but it changes everything around it. And here's the quick reward. When you learn to master this signal, you no longer need to beg for respect. It comes naturally. You attract opportunities, set boundaries, and inspire trust, not because you shouted, but because you maintained silence. It's as if you were a king among your subjects, without the crown on your head. Now, the detail few understand. This confidence isn't a gift. It's built, trained, honed like a blade. And if you stick around until the end, you'll discover step by step how Machiavelli already foresaw the secrets to forging this unshakable presence. There's something curious about confidence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to impose itself, nor does it need to be ostentatious. Truly confident people carry a calmness that doesn't need to be advertised. Unlike arrogance, which seeks an audience and recognition, genuine confidence manifests itself in small gestures, in the way we speak, even in the way we enter a room. Machiavelli already taught that the appearance of virtue can be strategic, but deep down, authentic confidence dispenses with masks. While the arrogant rush to show how much they know, the confident take their time. They know that silence often carries more weight than any speech. Imagine a business leader. The arrogant person, when confronted, raises their voice, cites numbers, and attacks those who disagree. The confident person, on the other hand, listens, pauses, and responds clearly. It is in this contrast that the difference is revealed. One relies on disguised insecurity, the other on the real security of those who dominate their own field. It is no coincidence that Machiavelli spoke of politics guided by reality, not ideals. The arrogant person lives on idealizations about themselves, the confident person on concrete results. In everyday life, this translates into simple examples. An arrogant person is a colleague who never misses a chance to correct someone in public, just to reaffirm a false sense of superiority. A confident person corrects in private, preserving the other person's dignity. The arrogant person needs an audience. The confident person only needs internal coherence. The difference is stark. If the arrogant person says, "I'm the best," the confident person lets the facts prove it. It's the old principle that it's better to be feared than loved, as long as one avoids being hated. True respect comes from consistency, not self-promotion. This distinction can be applied in negotiations, interviews, or even personal relationships. Think of a job interview. The arrogant person fills the room with impactful statements but can't back up what they say. The confident person, though speaking little, conveys firmness in their eyes, posture, and the stories they share. It's almost a calculated use of force. They say what's necessary, and precisely because they don't exaggerate, their words stick. Arrogance is instantly exhausted. Confidence resonates later. Behind this lies something even deeper. Authentic confidence is born of self-mastery. It's the fruit of knowing oneself, understanding one's virtues and also one's shadows. Arrogance, in turn, runs away from this inner connection and therefore needs to invent an inflated version of oneself. Confidence isn't about appearing bigger, but about not being afraid to appear smaller when necessary. And it's precisely in this ability to govern oneself that the next point opens up, because what truly sustains confidence is the ability to master one's own emotions. True confidence has an invisible root: self-mastery. It's curious how people believe that power is about controlling others, when in fact the first and greatest power is controlling one's own reactions. Machiavelli said that politics should be guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is simple. Those who don't control their impulses end up being controlled by them. Self-control is like an invisible army that protects the mind. It's not about repressing emotions, but about channeling them. Those who master this art don't rush, don't explode, don't lose their way. They know that at certain times, the end justifies the means, and that calm can be a much more effective means than fury. Imagine a tense meeting where everyone is heated. The arrogant individual loses his composure, raises his voice, demonstrating fragility disguised as strength. The confident individual, using calculated force, takes a deep breath and speaks softly, but firmly. The whole room feels the difference. Because self-control is magnetic, those who master themselves appear larger, more solid, more trustworthy. It's what keeps an investor from panicking when the market plummets, or a leader from despairing in the face of a crisis. Virtue, as Machiavelli said, is precisely this: the ability to act according to circumstances without being a slave to them. This trait is so powerful that it defines success in completely different areas. An athlete, for example, needs discipline to train every day, even when unmotivated. An entrepreneur faced with failure must resist the urge to give up. A person in a relationship, when provoked, must restrain the urge to retaliate with hurtful words. A confident person doesn't react automatically, they choose their response. It's a decision based on true human nature. Everyone experiences anger, fear, and pride, but few can control these forces. Developing this self-control isn't just about theory. It requires daily practice, almost like training a muscle. A simple exercise is the conscious pause. Before responding, count to 3 mentally. It seems trivial, but this tiny space between stimulus and reaction can change the entire narrative. Another practice is keeping a journal, recording intense emotions to understand where they come from. And if you want to delve deeper, there are books like Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, which show how this trait impacts your entire life. A confident person understands that mastering oneself is more valuable than mastering 1,000 enemies. This trait is so rare that when it appears, it's impossible not to notice. It's almost like a silent aura. The person may not even say anything, but their serenity in moments of chaos commands respect. They don't need to beg for trust, they inspire trust. And the most fascinating thing is that often this strength lies not in what is said, but in what is chosen not to say. This is where we discover an even more subtle secret. Silence, when used well, is a sharper weapon than any argument. Silence is a territory few master. Most feel uncomfortable when it arises, rushing to fill it with words, justifications, or nervous laughter. But the truly confident understand that silence is a strategic resource, as effective as any speech. Machiavelli warned about the calculated use of force. A direct attack is not always the best path. Sometimes a pause is more lethal. Remaining silent in the face of provocation can generate more impact than responding immediately. Silence creates space, lends weight to one's presence, and shows that one is not a slave to the rush to explain oneself. Imagine a debate. The insecure person rushes to counter every point, afraid of appearing weak. The confident person, on the other hand, allows the other person to talk more than they should. They know that the more their opponent talks, the more likely they are to contradict themselves. This is a classic example of politics guided by reality, not ideals. In reality, silence exposes others' weaknesses and strengthens the image of those who use it consciously. It's like in a negotiation. Sometimes the most powerful proposition is not to respond immediately. The pause makes the other side rethink, hesitate, and even reveal themselves. This skill also applies to personal life. Think of a couple's argument. Whoever shouts the loudest believes they've won, but often only fuels the fire. The silence of the confident acts like cold water. It's not passivity, it's strategy. It's like saying without words, I choose not to react now because my energy is too precious to waste. It's in this restraint that true virtue manifests itself. The ability to control the situation simply by not being swept up in the chaos. In practice, silence can be trained. A simple technique is to respond with an intentional pause in important conversations. Count to 3 before speaking. This pause demonstrates self-control and conveys confidence. Another practice is to truly listen without planning your next sentence while the other person is speaking. When you do this, you convey a sense of total presence, something rare and extremely valuable. And this is where the magic happens. People trust more those who don't have to constantly justify themselves. After all, it's better to be feared than loved, and silence often causes more fear than words. Interestingly, silence can also be used as a weapon of seduction. How many times have you noticed that those who speak little in a room are precisely those who attract the most attention? It's because withholding creates mystery. The absence of words opens the door to projections. Others begin to imagine what you're thinking, and this amplifies your influence. It's a way to avoid being hated, because those who speak less expose themselves less. But it's also a way to increase the weight of one's presence. And this is where the next trait connects. Silence only has real power when aligned with solid internal values, which guide your choices even when no one is watching. There's a stark difference between living according to the external winds and walking guided by deeply rooted values. Truly confident people don't need applause to stay on their feet. They're guided by principles that have become flesh in their lives. It's like Machiavelli said, a policy guided by reality, not ideals. In concrete reality, masks fall, and only those with firm convictions remain whole. These values function like a silent compass. No matter the pressures, judgment, or temptations of the moment, the direction remains because it's already defined within. A simple example. Imagine someone in a corporate environment, pressured to manipulate data to please investors. The arrogant person gives in, seeking immediate recognition. The confident person refuses, even if it costs temporary discomfort. They know that consistency with their values preserves trust in the long term, and trust is a capital that cannot be bought. It's like the principle that the end justifies the means, but intelligently. If the end is to preserve integrity, the means is to withstand the pressure without giving in. This firmness isn't moralism, it's strategy. In personal life, the logic is the same. Those who act with values don't get lost in every opinion they receive, nor do they mold their identity to fit expectations. Consider a person who chooses not to respond to toxic messages in group chats simply to avoid controversy. They don't remain silent out of fear, but because their peace is worth more than winning pointless arguments. This is a type of calculated use of force, not wasting energy on battles that add nothing. Virtue, in this case, is knowing how to say no, even when everyone expects you to say yes. To develop this internal alignment, it's helpful to write your core values down on paper. List what truly matters to you, perhaps freedom, loyalty, growth, or justice. Then compare your daily decisions with this list. Are you acting according to it, or letting yourself be guided by what others expect? This practice transforms small choices into declarations of who you are. And remember, avoiding being hated doesn't mean pleasing everyone. It means not betraying yourself, because those who hate themselves inside will never be respected outside. When you act according to your values, every word and gesture carries consistency. It's impossible not to notice. Your posture changes, your presence strengthens, your confidence solidifies. It's like building an invisible fortress. You may even weather storms, but they won't bring you down. And this is precisely where the connection to the next point arises. If internal values support the foundation, then confidence requires perfect coherence between thought, speech, and action, so that nothing you proclaim is contradicted by your own actions. Few things are as destructive to trust as inconsistency. When someone says one thing and does another, they instantly lose credibility. And the opposite is also true. When thought, speech, and action work together, a silent authority is born that no one can fake. Machiavelli spoke of the importance of the appearance of virtue, but when appearance matches practice, the impact is immensely greater. The confident person doesn't need to waste energy on justifications because their life already proves what they say. In politics, in business, or even in a romantic relationship, this consistency acts as an invisible seal of authenticity. Imagine a leader who demands punctuality but is always late. What message does he convey? A confident leader who demands discipline is the first to be present, setting an example for what he demands. This is true politics guided by reality, not ideals. Reality is setting an example before demanding. When rhetoric is empty, respect dies. When rhetoric is supported by practice, respect flourishes. In everyday life, this can be tested in simple situations. If someone promises to take care of their health but can't break destructive habits, it sends a clear message: they're not trustworthy. The same goes for someone who talks about honesty but lies about small things. The arrogant person believes words are enough. The confident person understands that every gesture is a signature of character. This is where the phrase, "better to be feared than loved," takes on new meaning. Feared not because of physical fear, but because of the respect generated by consistency. To develop this consistency, it's helpful to practice small daily commitments. Did you promise to wake up early? Keep it. Did you promise to save? Save, even if it's just a small amount. Did you promise to call someone? Call them. These acts may seem trivial, but each time you keep a promise, whether internal or external, you reinforce your self-confidence. And when you believe in your own word, others inevitably come to believe it too. This is virtù and fortuna in action. Virtù in discipline, fortuna in the fruits that life yields as a consequence. This coherence creates a magnetism that's hard to explain. People sense integrity, even without concrete proof. It's as if there's an invisible harmony between what you think, what you say, and what you do. This harmony attracts trust, respect, and even opportunities. But there's an even deeper detail. External coherence is only maintained if you master your internal narrative. In other words, before convincing others, you must convince yourself and not let internal insecurity corrupt your actions. The greatest battlefield is not outside, but within one's own mind. It is there that true confidence is born or dies. Those who master their own internal narrative don't let thoughts of doubt or insecurity dictate their actions. It's the old Machiavelli lesson: make decisions based on true human nature. And human nature is fragile, full of fears and impulses. But the confident choose the voice they listen to. They know that thoughts are like armies. If they're not careful, they may find themselves commanded by mutinous soldiers. Imagine a professional about to present a project. If their internal narrative says, "I'm going to make mistakes, they'll laugh at me," their body responds with cold sweat and trembling. But if they choose to tell themselves that they're prepared, that their effort is valuable, their posture changes, their voice becomes firmer, and their presence grows. It's exactly how the end justifies the means. Controlling the mind is the necessary means to achieve any external goal. Those who don't master this internal voice live in an invisible war, where every negative thought sabotages action before it even happens. In practice, controlling this narrative requires practice. One powerful exercise is to replace automatic self-criticism with strategic affirmations. For example, instead of thinking, "I'm not good enough," replace it with, "I may not know everything, but I know enough to get started." Another is to record small victories, creating a concrete record of achievements that serve as ammunition against self-doubt. It's like building your own loyal armies within your mind, thoughts that fight for you, not against you. This internal self-control also connects with adaptability. Life is unpredictable, and the confident person knows they can't depend on a single fixed plot. They rewrite their narrative according to the circumstances, without losing the thread of who they are. This is where the idea of constant adaptability comes in. When the scenario changes, they change with it, but without losing their way. Unlike the arrogant person who insists on unrealistic narratives just to maintain an image, the confident person adjusts the story they tell themselves lucidly, without fantasies. This internal narrative is what sustains external coherence. When you believe in yourself, you don't need masks or exaggerated defenses. It's what gives solidity to your posture, calmness to your speech, and firmness to your gaze. But there's an even more liberating point. When the internal narrative is strong, external approval is no longer essential. The confident person no longer depends on applause or likes to feel valid because they've already built an inner stage where their own voice is sufficient. And that's precisely where the next trait reveals itself: independence from external approval. The most common prison of insecurity is the constant need for approval. Those who depend on applause to feel valid are never truly free. The confident understand that recognition is pleasant, but it isn't fuel. They are guided by something more solid, their own values and convictions. As Machiavelli said, avoiding being hated is strategic, but it's not necessary to be loved all the time. Authentic confidence arises when internal validation is worth more than any external applause. See how this plays out in everyday life. On social media, many people are constantly chasing likes and comments as if every click were a testament to their personal worth. The confident, on the other hand, posts because they believe in what they share, not because they need an immediate response. They practice politics guided by reality, not ideals. The reality is that the public is fickle. Today they applaud, tomorrow they criticize. Those who base their self-esteem on this get lost in an eternal cycle of ups and downs. This trait also manifests itself in larger life decisions. Consider someone who chooses a career solely to please their parents or conform to social expectations. This person may achieve status, but inside they will carry the weight of a life that isn't theirs. The confident person, in contrast, chooses paths aligned with their beliefs, even if they are less popular. This is where the notion of virtù and fortuna comes in. Virtù in the courage to remain true to what matters. Fortuna in the opportunities that arise when living authentically. To apply this, a practical exercise is to learn to say no without feeling guilty. Saying no is an act of silent power, a form of calculated force. If someone asks for something that violates your values, firmly refuse. Another practice is to set personal goals that don't depend on anyone's approval. such as learning a new language, improving your health, or saving for a project of your own. These small gestures build a shielded self-esteem because they don't require external scrutiny to exist. This independence creates a magnetic presence. When someone realizes you're not desperate for recognition, they start to respect you even more. The paradox is fascinating. Precisely when you stop seeking approval, it starts to come naturally. But this independence doesn't mean closing yourself off to criticism. On the contrary, it allows you to receive feedback without crumbling because your foundation is already solid. And it's precisely this maturity that opens the next point: how to deal with criticism constructively without losing your bearings or letting yourself be shaken. How someone reacts to criticism reveals more about their confidence than any rehearsed speech. An insecure person sees an attack in everything, shuts down, or resorts to aggressive defense. Arrogant people, in turn, dismiss any comment as unattainable. Confident people, on the other hand, see criticism as raw material. They filter what is useful and discard what is noise. Machiavelli spoke of politics guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is that criticism will always exist. What makes the difference is the maturity to use it as leverage, not a chain. Think of a professional athlete. Every mistake analyzed by the coach isn't an insult, but a chance to improve. The same is true in life. Valid criticism is like a map that points out where to adjust the course. A confident person understands this, so they listen without giving in. They practice the principle that the end justifies the means. If the end is growth, the means can be enduring the momentary discomfort of criticism. The arrogant person wastes time trying to silence every opposing voice. The confident person gains time by absorbing what makes sense and ignoring the rest. In the workplace, this trait becomes a game changer. Imagine a professional receiving harsh feedback from their boss. The insecure one takes it personally and becomes discouraged. The arrogant one responds, trying to prove they're right. The confident one, however, thanks them, analyzes them, and returns even more prepared. This is the practice of calculated use of strength, not wasting energy fighting criticism, but directing it towards strengthening your weaknesses. This is what makes leaders truly respected, because they demonstrate humility without losing their composure. A practical exercise is to always ask yourself, when faced with criticism, what of this is real and useful to me? Write down your answers and work on them. If someone says you talk too much in meetings, practice listening more. If someone comments that your writing is confusing, seek clarity by reading good authors. But if someone criticizes only to destabilize, practice strategic contempt. Machiavelli taught how to avoid being hated, and one way to do this is to avoid exhausting yourself responding to pointless provocations. This ability to filter criticism creates emotional shielding. A confident person doesn't feel diminished by a negative comment because their self-esteem doesn't depend on external approval. At the same time, they don't close themselves off to suggestions because they know that even their enemy can teach them something, albeit indirectly. This posture creates a solid presence. The person appears unstoppable because they don't let themselves be corroded by words. And this brings us to the next point. When someone effortlessly masters criticism, their own presence becomes striking without needing to exaggerate or beg for attention. There's a fascinating paradox. The more someone tries to appear important, the less real impact they make. Those who don't need to prove anything, however, occupy their space naturally. This is the essence of confidence. A solid presence that doesn't depend on loud decibels or exaggerated gestures. Machiavelli said, "It's better to be feared than loved," but a commanding presence doesn't require overt intimidation. It asserts itself through a balance of poise, silence, and conviction. A confident person doesn't need to shout to be heard. Their mere arrival changes the atmosphere. Think of a meeting room. The insecure person arrives anxious, talking too much to assert themselves. The arrogant person enters theatrically, trying to be the center of attention. The confident person arrives calmly, observing, and when they speak, everyone listens. This is a reflection of a policy guided by reality, not ideals. The reality is that presence isn't invented, it's constructed. And it's constructed with coherence, self-control, and strategic silence, the traits we've seen so far. Strength lies precisely in not needing to demonstrate strength all the time. This magnetism also extends to social life. Those who try too hard to be funny rarely entertain. Those who insist on boasting quickly sound tiresome. The confident, on the other hand, inspires respect even in trivial conversations. It's not about being the most talkative, but about being the most whole. This is a calculated use of force, speaking when necessary, remaining silent when strategic, acting when unavoidable. This is how a simple presence becomes remembered, even when the words have already been lost. Cultivating this presence doesn't require theatrics, but daily practice. An upright posture, a direct gaze, and firm, measured gestures convey more confidence than any memorized speech. A simple tip: in interactions, take a deep breath before responding, maintaining a calm body. Another, avoid anxious movements, such as fidgeting with your hands or speaking quickly. These are subtle details, but they make the difference between appearing insecure and radiating confidence. This is the construction of virtue, which doesn't depend on luck, fortune, but on the discipline of small habits. This striking presence creates memories. Whether it's at a dinner party, an interview, or even a walk down the street, when confidence is genuine, others notice, even without understanding why. But there's something that further amplifies this impact: the use of stories, metaphors, and analogies. When a confident person speaks, they don't just inform, they connect. And that's precisely where we come to the next point: examples and narratives that illustrate this trait, making it tangible and unforgettable for those listening. Stories have a power that numbers and concepts never achieve. They enter the mind without asking permission and leave lasting marks. To understand authentic confidence, just look at concrete examples. Think of Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, and when he was released, it wasn't rage that spoke louder, but self-control. He showed that a true leader doesn't act on impulse, but with clarity of purpose. This is virtù in action, as Machiavelli would say, the ability to transform even adversity into a stage for greatness. Another example comes from sports. Michael Jordan, considered the greatest basketball player in history, missed decisive shots thousands of times, yet his confidence remained unshaken. Why? Because he didn't let himself be dominated by the internal narrative of failure. Each mistake was just a step toward the next success. It's the principle that the end justifies the means. If the end was to win, the means included making more mistakes than everyone else, but without giving up. A confident person turns failures into fuel. In the business world, Steve Jobs illustrates another essential trait. He didn't seek constant approval. He was often criticized as difficult, even tyrannical. But his confidence came from the clarity of his vision, not from external applause. He embodied the maxim that it's better to be feared than loved, as long as you weren't hated to the point of losing strategic allies. Jobs didn't need everyone to like him. He needed his idea to be realized. This distinction is what separates the visionary from the insecure. Even in literary stories, this pattern repeats itself. Think of characters like Odysseus from the Odyssey. Faced with monsters, storms, and temptations, he survives not through brute force, but through cunning and the calculated use of force. His confidence lay not in defeating each enemy through violence, but in knowing when to advance, when to retreat, when to remain silent. This wisdom is universal. Whether in myth, business, or politics, those who excel are not the loudest, but those who master their own agenda. These examples reveal that true trust doesn't need to be explained in complicated formulas. It's seen in practice, in stories spanning centuries. From statesmen to athletes, from entrepreneurs to mythical heroes, they all demonstrate the same pattern. Self-control, strategic silence, coherence, solid values, and independence from the approval of others. They are invisible but loyal armies that sustain a powerful presence. And now that we've explored all these traits, there's only one thing left: to set the stage and weave it all together into a single plot. A script that begins with an introduction and ends with an action-provoking conclusion. So tell me, how many times have you realized you were seeking too much approval? How many times have you lost yourself in empty words, trying to prove a value that deep down you doubted? This is where life separates the insecure from the confident. Because true confidence isn't a frill, it's a survival strategy. Are you ready to apply this? Are you willing to practice silence, to align speech and action, to endure criticism without crumbling? Or will you continue living on momentary applause that holds nothing when the lights go out? This is the provocation few have the courage to ask. To what extent do you govern yourself, and to what extent are you governed by the opinions of others? Think about it. If even kings, generals, and leaders needed to master this trait to command, what makes you believe you can live without it? The world respects those who don't sell themselves for cheap applause, and respect in the end is true capital. If you want to continue learning how to transform your life with ideas no one dares to say out loud, join this community now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you won't hear ready-made phrases, but cutting truths that can change the course of your life. After all, the lethal confidence Machiavelli described isn't theory. It's practice, it's power, it's survival. And the question remains, will you just watch or will you apply it?